Well, I'm making this video on different days, and I'm trying to figure out what I need to say and make it be all coherent as one long lesson. And anyway, so I guess I cut it short earlier when I shouldn't have. I was in the middle of talking about how to dig in the sequence. So right now, it's in first gear. The wire is in to hold it so that it doesn't disengage while you're in the middle of digging. And so you would put the auger, I'll go later and explain about the up and down part, but let's just imagine you understand that part. And you got the auger sitting on the bottom of the hole. Then you would pull this lever, the one on your left, until it snaps in. And it pulled that engagement bearing over there. And normally you will have, I usually run it at about 2/3 or 3/4 throttle. Seems like that most of the time you don't really have to run it wide open to do what you need to do. If you're having to run it wide open, then to keep up the RPM when you're digging, you're probably digging too hard and putting too much strain on the rig, or using too big an auger or something like that. You'd be better off to, start out with something smaller and do it in 2 steps as far as making your rig last longer and break less. But anyway, put the throttle about 3/4 now. You'll see this particular one, it's like if you push the lever all the way down, it stays good. So if you push it all the way up, it stays good. But when it's running, you can see it kind of springs like this if it's somewhere in the middle. So normally I take this wire and I just fold it around like that, and I set it at the whatever position that I want it to be at, and that holds it pretty steady. And then, so while it's drilling, I would then crowd the Kelly down, and I'll make a separate video about that. Basically, you use the combination of this pedal and holding the drum in front of you still, and then you use this lever, pulling it this way to move that funny cylinder up on the derrick that's got the rod sticking out of both ends, and that will make the outer Kelly go down slowly, and that way you can put downward pressure onto your soils you're trying to dig into. But that's a short story of it. I can explain it in depth later. But basically, you do that until you get to the point where you've got as much on your tool that you want. Then you disengage this lever by pushing it back to the middle, and you raise your Kelly up. And when you get to the top, then you'll rotate around to the side. When you rotate around to the side, well, let me back up and say this. The easiest way, let me go forward and I'll come back to this. All right, when you're going to turn the rig around to the side or spin off over the top of the hole, either one, wherever you're going to spin your dirt off, if you have a big enough auger, say it's 6-foot diameter or bigger, in that case, the diameter of that auger is large enough so that the circumference of that auger is going to be moving pretty fast, even when the transmission is in first gear, if you push this lever into the spin-off position. So remember that the top clutch, that's your digging clutch, engaged there, and then your lower clutch is your spin-off clutch. That one sends more chain and makes the rig turn the Kelly faster. So normally the procedure would be, if you got a big auger, then you can probably leave it in first gear. You pull this lever first to get the auger turning, and then you push it while it's already turning, and that'll speed it up some more. And then that will usually be enough to spin the dirt off if it's not something real sticky. Now, if you are going to be using a smaller auger, or if you have sticky material, then the best thing to do in general, I think, is to spin off using the 3rd gear. Sometimes people will use reversed to spin it off, especially if they're drilling in wet material, because when you turn it in reverse, it's approximately the same RPM as 2nd gear, but because it's turning backwards, it's kind of like you're unscrewing the auger out of the material that's on it, and if it's slippery, it will kind of slide down and off and not splatter as much. If you spin it in 3rd gear, it throws it further away from the auger, and has a tendency to splash back on you more than it would if you did it in reverse. but it doesn't get it, when you do it in reverse, it doesn't get all the material off as reliably as in third gear. So normally I just use third gear, because swapping between third and reverse takes a little bit of doing, because there's no brake that stops the rotation of the Kelly. So if you have it going in third gear, it's going to keep spinning for a while before just the friction and all the rotating parts slow it down enough to put it in reverse. So if you try to do it in reverse, I maybe said it backwards, but if you try to do it in reverse, it didn't get all the material off, then you got to wait till it stops or almost stops, then shift it into third gear, and then you could try the same thing again. But so let me back up a second and then talk about the sequence of what happens. All right, imagine that you're drilling and you're digging the hole and your auger's on the bottom of the hole in the dirt. Well, this chain is going to be turning pretty fast, and as soon as you're in the engaged position, as soon as you push it to neutral, then the torque is going to stop at your clutch. But all the parts are in tension all the way to the Kelly, and there's a number of places where there's slack in the connection, and so what's going to happen is it's going to spring back, and that input shaft that you can see right now with that chain is going to turn counterclockwise, which is backwards to the normal rotation when it's being driven by the engine, and it'll spin, I don't know, depends, I guess, how much grease you got and everything and how loose everything is, but you know, it might spin a couple revolutions before it stops. So while it's doing that and it's going relatively slow, that's the ideal time to shift the transmission, because the parts are moving, but they're not moving very fast relative to each other. And so the dog clutches are the easiest to engage when that gear is turning slowly and the other part's not turning maybe hardly at all. Because see, from the output shaft to the Kelly, it's just rigid connections everywhere, or mechanical connections. So there's a little bit of slack in all the different combinations of pieces, especially in the chains, but not a lot. But on this side, when your clutch is disconnected, then basically this sprocket, the chain, and the two sprockets that run on this side, on these two shafts, can all just kind of freewheel, because they're all basically in neutral. And so so the output shaft will be sitting still, or virtually, and then that shaft will be rotating, you know, at just a slow speed because of the whatever the tension that was in the system when you disengage the clutch. And so if you push this back to the center to go to neutral and that thing spins backwards, then you want to pull this pin out of the, whatever, I guess you couldn't see that, pull the pin out of this here and then shift it into third just right away. And if you do that, then you'll usually get it the first time. If you are a little bit slow about it, then that gear is going to stop and this may not line up, in which case you would then push on that lever while you just barely pull this one until that bearing just barely starts to engage and makes that spider and the chain and everything rotate just a little bit, so basically pushing on this lever, the shift lever, while pulling on this one just a little bit. And when it pops in, then you're in third gear when you push that forward, and so then you would pick the Kelly up, rotate the rig around if you're going to be spinning off to one side or the other. Then you'd pull this to get it started in third and push it if it needs to be to spin it very fast. And even if you have an auger that's 2 foot diameter, usually the material will spin off pretty good unless it's like kind of a sticky clay. If it is a sticky material and it doesn't want to come off of the auger, then what you can do is, while you have this lever pushed away, then recall that you have your 2 Kellys, right? And they're telescopic. And at least when you're first running it, I would recommend that you leave your Kellys pinned together all the time if you can, because it's just easier to run it that way. And if you do that, then what I'm about to describe will be simpler. Imagine now you've got the Kelly picked up, it's above the surface of the ground, and you have your right foot on the brake, you're holding the lock in, your left foot is disengaged, your left brake is disengaged, so your inner Kelly hoist is basically in neutral. What you can do if the dirt is not coming off the auger good when you're spinning it fast by pushing this lever right here away from you in third gear is you can push that one away and at the same time lift this one and just kind of do like this in quick snatches. And what that'll do is you'll be grabbing the clutch and releasing the clutch. And so on the inner Kelly, that will pick the inner Kelly up, and basically the pin that is through the inner Kelly will hit the top of the hole in the outer Kelly and kind of put a jolt into that auger and dirt and usually loosen it. If you do that 2 or 3 times while it's spinning, you'll almost always get all the dirt off if you're doing that in third gear. You can do the same thing in first gear if you have an auger that's, you know, maybe 4 foot or 5 foot diameter and you don't have any material that's real sticky. If you have just silts or even sands that's not wet, then that stuff will usually come off of the auger even in first gear when you have the spin-off clutch engaged, if you bump the Kellys together like that. Now, you can do the same thing with the Kellys not pinned together, but it's a more complex sequence. So what you've got to do, if the Kellys are not pinned together, to hold the auger up off the ground, you've got to have this lever, this pedal engaged, and that will stop that big spool for your Kelly hoist, your inner Kelly hoist, from turning. So that'll hold your auger up. So let's imagine that you are going to pick your auger up and you want to spin it off. Well, you've got, let's say your outer Kelly's up and you want to pick your inner Kelly up, then you'd have to release your pedal. Basically, you got somebody driving crazy. All right, you push the back side of the pedal to release the brake and then pull on this just a little bit. And you could pull this and let it go 2 or 3 times and have the top of your auger hit the bottom of your outer Kelly. And then as soon as you let that go, it's going to drop and hit the ground if you don't put this pedal back on. So you basically leave your foot on that, you release the brake long enough to pop this a couple times, and then you hold your brake again, and that way it won't drop. Anyway, I'm going to have to take a break from this. I got to pick up kids from school.